Damian Cross exited the elevator on the top floor of Cross Enterprises, his presence immediately commanding attention from every employee. The morning sunlight glinted off his platinum watch as he strode through the corridor, not bothering to acknowledge the hushed whispers that followed him. His reputation as Manhattan's most ruthless CEO had been earned through years of uncompromising decisions and ice-cold business tactics. "The Parker deal needs to be closed by end of day," he stated to his assistant without breaking stride, and rescheduled the board meeting. "I need time to review the quarterly reports before facing those vultures." His office a minimalist sanctuary of glass and steel, overlooking the city's skyline, reflected the man himself, meticulously organized, impossibly pristine, and completely devoid of warmth. The walls displayed his achievements. Harvard Business School. Forbes covers the financial empire he'd built from his father's failing company. What they didn't show was a single personal photograph or memento. Damian had long ago learned that sentiment was weakness, and weakness was unacceptable. That evening, rain lashed against his Bentley as his driver navigated through Manhattan's gridlock streets. Damian barely noticed, eyes fixed on his tablet as he finalized the acquisition that would dismantle his closest competitor. 300 jobs would be lost. He didn't flinch at the thought. The sudden screech of tires and blinding headlights came without warning. The impact sent Damian's world spinning, metal crushing around him like paper. The last thing he registered before darkness claimed him was the taste of blood and the distant wail of sirens. Dr. Alara Hayes had been on duty for 18 hours straight, and they wheeled him in. Her skilled hands moved with practiced precision as she assessed the unconscious man's injuries. Multiple lacerations, possible internal bleeding, broken ribs. She called out to her team, "Let's get him stabilized and prepped for surgery." Wasn't until they cut away his blood-soaked designer suit that a nurse whispered, "That's Damian Cross." Alara barely looked up. "I don't care if he's the president. Right now, he's a patient who needs our help." Hours later, when Damian awoke, in the recovery room, his eyes found Alara updating his chart. For a moment, disoriented by pain and medication, he saw something unfamiliar in her face, complete absence of fear or deference. She met his gaze directly, her expression professional but unimpressed. "Welcome back, Mr. Cross," she said simply. "You've had quite the night." For the first time in years, Damian Cross found himself at a loss for words. 3 days into his hospital stay, Damian had already terrorized half the nursing staff and attempted to conduct business meetings from his bed despite strict orders against it. The hospital administration walked on eggshells around him, aware of his influence and the generous donations that his company had made to the medical center over the years. Only Dr. Hayes remained unmoved by his demands and thinly veiled threats. "Your body needs rest to heal properly," she stated firmly, confiscating the satellite phone his assistant had smuggled in. "The Empire will survive without you for a few days. Do you have any idea who I am?" Damian's voice was dangerously low. Alara checked his vitals with practiced efficiency. "You're my patient, Mr. Cross. Nothing more, nothing less. And here your net worth doesn't accelerate healing." Something about her calm defiance fascinated him. She moved with quiet confidence, her intelligence evident in her precise movements and the thoughtful way she explained his treatment plan. Unlike everyone else in his life, she didn't simper or cower. When he pushed, she pushed back not with anger, but with unwavering conviction. On the 5th day, when pain kept him awake despite medication, he found himself watching her review his chart during late rounds. The overhead lights caught the subtle hints of auburn in her dark hair, and for the first time he noticed the delicate curve of her jawline. "Tell me about yourself, Dr. Hayes," he said suddenly. She looked up, surprised by the personal query. "I'm here to monitor your recovery, not to chat. Humor me. I'm in pain and bored senseless." Something in his tone must have convinced her. "I graduated top of my class at Columbia. I specialize in trauma surgery. I have a cat named Einstein who probably misses me since I've been pulling double shifts this week." "Why medicine?" he pressed, genuinely curious. A shadow crossed her face. "My father died when I was 14. The doctors couldn't save him. I decided then that I would learn to save others. The raw honesty in her answer caught him off guard. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent message from his CFO about a potential hostile takeover attempt by their competitors. "I need to be discharged now." His mask of cold efficiency slammed back into place. Ilara shook her head. "Not possible. Your latest scans show. I don't care what they show. I've signed the necessary waivers. I'm leaving in the morning." Eyes flashed with frustration. "It's fine. Throw away weeks of healing for a boardroom power play. It's your life," for reasons he couldn't explain. Her disappointment bothered him more than it should have. The takeover crisis had been averted, but at a cost. Damien's hasty hospital departure had resulted in complications that now required regular checkups at the hospital. Each visit brought him back to Dr. Hayes, whose professional demeanor couldn't quite mask her disapproval of his choices. Autumn rain streamed down the windows of his penthouse as he reviewed her latest medical report. The technical language couldn't obscure the underlying message. He was pushing himself too hard, risking his recovery. His phone rang his sister, the only family member he maintained any contact with. "You missed dinner again?" Catherine said without preamble. Something came up. Something always does. Her sigh carried years of disappointment. The boys asked about their uncle. Again, guilt, an emotion he rarely entertained, pricked at him. His nephews were growing up barely knowing him. "Damien, when was the last time you did something that wasn't about the company?" The question lingered after they hung up. Found himself staring at Dr. Hayes' signature on his medical report, remembering how her hands had worked so skillfully to repair the damage his body had sustained. The next day, against his better judgment, he waited until after her shift to approach her in the hospital parking garage. "Dr. Hayes." She startled, keys in hand. "Mr. Cross, is something wrong?" "I'd like to thank you properly for saving my life." "Dinner, perhaps?" Ilara's eyebrows rose. "That's not necessary. It's my job." "I insist, and I decline. Professional boundaries exist for a reason." Rejection stung more than he'd anticipated. "You're not intimidated by me." Tired smile ghosted across her lips. "Should I be?" "You're just a man who built walls so high, you've forgotten what's on the other side." That night, a violent storm knocked out power across the city. Damien was reviewing acquisition papers by candlelight when his phone rang with news that sent him racing back to the hospital through flooded streets. The emergency generator had failed during a critical procedure. Dr. Hayes had performed a complex surgery by the light of battery-powered lamps. Refusing to abandon her patient despite the risk to her career, he found her outside the operating room, exhausted but triumphant. Her scrubs were spattered with blood, her hair falling loose from... "It's usually neat bun. Could lose your license," he said quietly. She looked up, surprised to see him. "The patient would have died if we'd waited. Let me help. I have connections on the hospital board." For the first time, genuine anger flashed in her eyes. "I don't want your connections or your influence. Not everything can be solved with money. And power, Mr. Cross?" As she walked away, Damien realized with startling clarity that he'd met the one person in his world he couldn't control or impress. She was the only one who mattered. 3 weeks later, Damien found himself standing before a nondescript apartment door in Brooklyn, clutching a folder of documents. His private investigator had been thorough. The file contained everything about Dr. Ilara Hayes, including the address of this small apartment where she spent precious few hours between hospital shifts. He shouldn't be here. This crossed every professional and ethical boundary. Yet after she'd been suspended pending investigation for the generator incident, he couldn't stay away. His knock was answered with silence. Then footsteps, and the door opened to reveal Ilara. In jeans and an oversized Columbia sweatshirt, her expression shifting from exhaustion to shock. "How did you find my address?" Wariness edged her voice. "I have resources." The word sounded hollow even to him. "May I come in?" Against her better judgment, she stepped aside. The apartment was modest, but warm bookshelves overflowing with medical texts and classic literature. A worn leather couch piled with soft throws and framed photographs showing Ilara with an older woman who shared her smile. "Your mother?" asked, nodding toward the photos. "Yes, she lives in Oregon now." Ilara crossed her arms. "Why are you here, Mr. Cross?" He handed her the folder. "The hospital board is dropping the investigation." will be reinstated with full privileges and back pay. Her eyes widened as she scanned the documents. What did you do? It's nothing unethical. I simply pointed out that the generator failure was a structural issue, not physician error, and that the hospital would face significant liability if they punished a doctor for saving a life. She closed the folder slowly. Thank you. But that doesn't explain why you delivered this personally. The penthouse felt empty after meeting her in this lived-in space. His life suddenly seemed sterile by comparison. I've been having dreams, he admitted, about the accident, about waking up to see you standing over me. You were the first thing I saw when I thought I might die. Something shifted in her expression. Softening around the eyes, a subtle parting of lips. Damien ... It was the first time she'd used his first name. The sound of it in her voice broke something loose inside him. There's a charity gala next weekend. Come with me. She hesitated, then shook her head. I can't get involved with a patient. Not your patient anymore. The follow-ups are complete. There are still 100 reasons why this is a bad idea. Give me one good reason to try anyway. She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for something he hoped she would find. I get off shift at 7 on Friday. She finally said, don't be late. As he left her apartment, Damien realized he was smiling something he couldn't remember doing genuinely in years. The charity gala sparkled with Manhattan's elite. But Damien saw only Alara. She wore a simple midnight blue gown that caught the light as she moved. Throughout the evening, he found himself watching her interact with others, her genuine interest in their stories, her soft laughter at their jokes, the compassion that seemed to radiate from her very being. You're different tonight, noted. His sister Catherine, who had rarely seen him so attentive to anyone. Am I? He asked, not taking his eyes off Alara across the room. She must be special. Special. The word didn't begin to capture what Alara represented, a challenge to everything he'd built his life around. Where he calculated, she felt. Where he controlled, she connected. Later, as they escaped the stuffy ballroom for the rooftop garden, a gentle snow had begun to fall over the city. Alara tilted her face to the sky, snowflakes catching in her dark lashes. When I was treating you, she said quietly, I thought you were the most frustrating patient I'd ever had. Brilliant but cold. Powerful but isolated. And now? His voice had gone rough with emotion he'd spent a lifetime suppressing. Now I see the doors you keep locked, and the ones you're afraid to open. He stepped closer. And if I wanted to open them... A sudden crash of thunder interrupted the moment. The unseasonable snowstorm had intensified into something dangerous. As they hurried inside, news alerts flooded their phones. The hospital was calling in all available staff for a major interstate pileup. I have to go, Alara said, already pulling off her heels. I'll drive you.
Oh.
Through treacherous roads, they raced to the hospital. In the trauma center, Damien watched as Alara transformed into the focused physician he'd first met, coordinating teams and saving lives with calm efficiency. Hours later, when the crisis had stabilized, he found her in an empty consultation room, hands trembling with exhaustion and residual adrenaline. You were amazing, he said softly. She looked up, vulnerability clear in her eyes. 18 patients. We lost 2. Without thinking, he crossed to her, taking her hands in his. You saved 16 lives tonight. Why are you still here, Damien? You could be home, warm and dry. The question was weighted with meaning beyond the obvious. Why had the man who valued nothing but success and control remained in a chaotic emergency room for hours? Because you're here, he answered simply. Something broke in her expression, then a wall coming down to match his own. When she reached up to touch his face, her fingers were cool against his skin. You're not who I thought you were, she whispered. Either. Are you? Her lips brushed his hesitant at first, then with growing certainty. The kiss was gentle, yet overwhelming, a culmination of everything that had built between them since that first night in the hospital, for Damien Cross, who had spent his life avoiding vulnerability at all costs. The sensation was transformative. The ice that had encased his heart for so long began to melt, replaced by a warmth he'd forgotten was possible, when they finally broke apart. Snow still falling outside the windows, he pressed his forehead to hers and made a silent promise to the woman who had saved more than just his life. He would prove himself worthy of the second chance she'd given him. The cold-hearted CEO was gone. In his place stood simply a man, finally brave enough to love.